There are plenty of serial killers who were never brought to justice. The likes of Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer are probably the most well known. However, when we think of them, we assume they were in the past, and that with today's scientific advances, most serial killers would be caught quickly. While you'd be wrong, there are still hundreds of unsolved multiple murders supposedly attributed to a single individual, and many of them are very much in our present day. This was a video topic selected by our patrons, and if you would like to vote on upcoming videos, then don't forget to check out our Patreon in the link in the description or in the comments section below. And now, without further ado, here we look at 5 serial killers that are likely still alive but have never been caught. Hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. Butcher of Mons. Mons in Belgium is probably best known as the location of the Battle of Mons fought during the First World War. However, it's also the place one of the worst serial killers in Belgium history left some of his victims' remains. Nicknamed the Butcher of Mons, the unknown assailant began his murderous reign around 1995. For 2 years, he carried on killing unchecked until on March 22nd, 1997, a Mons police officer discovered 8 plastic bags that contained human remains. The bags were discovered along the Rue Emilie van der Vold in the village of Couem, just outside the city. After examination, it was revealed that the bags contained arms and legs belonging to 3 different women. The day after the find, another bag was found in the same area that contained a woman's torso, and on March 24th, a 10th bag was discovered, containing the bust of a woman, this time on the path of Concern in Mons. Further analysis of the remains revealed that the murders stretched back to at least 1995 or 1996, but the torso found on March 24th belonged to a victim who had been killed mere days before the discovery. Analysis of the bags revealed that at least 5 of them originated from the municipality of Knockheist, a seaside resort on the Belgium coast, over an hour-and-a-half drive from Mons. On April 12th, 2 more bags were found. These bags contained 1 foot, 1 leg and a head. All 10 bags also contained brightly coloured underwear. The systematic mutilation of the bodies made their identification difficult, although eventually they were all named. The youngest victim was 21 and the eldest 43. All the victims had in common was that they frequented the area of Mons railway station, and all were plagued by destitute or family issues. Belgium authorities were convinced they were the work of the same person, and believed they had a serial killer on their hands. The police also pointed out that there seemed to be a macabre pattern to where they dumped the body parts. For instance, Dump Street, the Path of Worry, the River Hate, and Jitters. They also theorized that the killer may have had some kind of medical training because each victim had been dismembered and mutilated with such precision. It was also deduced that the killer had a steady job based on the fact that all of his victims were murdered on weekends. During the investigation, which is still ongoing, several people were suspected of being involved in these murders, but no concrete evidence was found against them. To this day, the murders remain unsolved, and if they are still alive, the Butcher of Mons is still at large. Flat Tire Murders. The case dubbed the Flat Tire Murders linked 5 victims to a single perpetrator in Dade County, Florida in 1975. All the murders took place in the vicinity of Cutler Bay, known at the time of the killings as Cutler Ridge, and the Palmetto area of South Miami-Dade County. Investigators concluded that the killer deflated the tires of women's vehicles and then offered them assistance before killing them. His victims included 5 women from South Florida: Ronnie Gorlin, Elise Knapp, Barbara Stevens, Barbara Schreiber, and Belinda Zetroa. When Ronnie Gorlin and Elise Knapp were murdered in July 1975, investigators were convinced there was a connection between the killings. Years later, in August 2011, the assistant medical examiner of Dade County also connected the other 3 cases to the same killer. It was theorized that the suspect acted alone, moved from coast to coast, and was probably responsible for many more unsolved homicides carried out in similar circumstances. Investigators believe the killer is likely very intelligent, with an above-average IQ and strength. His method of killing so far has been a combination of shooting, stabbing with an ice pick, and blunt force trauma with hammer blows, with such force that 3 of the victims could not immediately be identified due to severe disfigurement. To date, no suspects have been interviewed and no one has been apprehended, and it's very likely that the flat tire murderer is still alive and could still be killing people across America. The Chicago Strangler. Chicago has always had a shady criminal past due to its ties to the mob, in particular Al Capone and Bugs Moran. It was also the home of America's very first serial killer, Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, to whom of which we have done a Murderous Minds documentary over on Patreon, which you can check out by clicking the link in the description or in the comment section below, where you'll get access to all of our Murderous Minds documentaries and other documentaries for just $2 per month. However, the city could have another serial killer on the loose, whose terrifying reign of terror is only just beginning to unfold. For the past 2 decades, Chicago has seen a series of eerily similar strangulation murders. The first victim was found in 2001, and since then other bodies have turned up in empty lots, vacant buildings, dark alleys, and even garbage containers. The victims have all been women between the ages of 18 and 58, and many of them struggled with drugs or prostitution, making them particularly vulnerable to predators on the street. In total, there are an astonishing 51 unsolved murders that all follow a similar pattern. The victims have been found in 3 specific areas of Chicago: the west side, the south side, and the far south side. However, despite striking similarities in the way the women were killed and dumped, it wasn't until 2018, when the latest victim was found, that investigators considered the possibility that one perpetrator was responsible. An interesting detail about the serial killer theory is that from 2001 to 2014, the murders occurred frequently. Then between 2014 to 2017, they abruptly stopped, suggesting the killer was in jail during this period, and since their release has picked up where he or she left off. Chicago police are quite coy about the serial killer being at large in the city, and instead told the media in 2019 that there might actually be several serial killers operating in the city, although the chances of several different serial killers using the same modus operandi would be extremely rare. With a case like this, you would expect it to make headline news. However, sadly, there have been few news stories and even fewer memorials or other public gestures that would have focused attention on these poor, unfortunate women and how they died. The Long Island Serial Killer, New York State. The Long Island Serial Killer, also known as LISK, or the Craigslist Ripper, is an unidentified suspected serial killer who is believed to be responsible for at least 10 murders over a 20-year period. The remains of 4 victims were found in December 2010, while 6 more sets of remains were found in March and April 2011. The bones and body parts were discovered when a police officer and his dog were on a routine training exercise when they stumbled across the skeletal remains of a woman in a nearly disintegrated burlap sack. This discovery led to a search, and 3 more bodies were found 2 days later in the same area on the north side of the Ocean Parkway. A few months later, in the spring of 2011, 4 more bodies were discovered in another area off the parkway, near Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach. Police then widened the search up to the Nassau County border, and a few days later another set of partial human remains were found, as well as a separate skull and 2 human teeth. Pathology reports stated that they were the remains of 10 people, 8 females, 1 male victim dressed as a woman, and a toddler daughter of one of the females. Torsos and other parts of some of the bodies were found in different locations, although some bits have never been discovered. 6 of the women have been identified, 1 only recently with the help of DNA analysis. The other 4, including the toddler and his mother, still have not been identified. Police reported that all of the victims appeared to be prostitutes who advertised their services on Craigslist. Initially, police worked on the assumption that there might be 2 killers, However, in November 2011, they stated their belief that one person is responsible for all 10 deaths. The single killer theory was linked to common characteristics among the condition and forensic evidence related to the bodies. To date, there has only been one suspect, a carpenter from Long Island named John Bitrolf, who was convicted in May 2017 and sentenced in September for the homicides of 2 prostitutes in 1993 and 1994. It's thought he is a suspect in at least one of these murders, although no charges have been brought against him. It was announced in June 2019 that the use of genetic genealogy might be used to identify the unidentified victims and possibly the killer. Although to date there are no further updates, and as far as we can tell, the Long Island killer is still at large and is responsible for far more murders than the 10 we've mentioned. Possible UK serial killer targeting elderly couples. Now, this is a new case. It comes after a report was published linking 2 unsolved historical murder cases of 2 elderly couples who died in similar circumstances in the 1990s. Both couples lived in the Cheshire area of England. The 2 cases re-examined were Howard and Beatrice Ainsworth and Donald and Oriel Ward. Mr. Ainsworth, 79, and Mrs. Ainsworth, 78, were found dead by police in 1996. Mrs. Ainsworth was found with a knife in her forehead and had her face hit repeatedly with a hammer and was partially covered by a pillow. Mr. Ainsworth had a bag tied around his head. At the gruesome scene, police found a suicide note seemingly written by Mr. Ainsworth, leading to the coroner and officers agreeing the case was a murder-suicide. 3 years later in 1999, a similar case took place where Mr. and Mrs. Ward were found dead in their homes after an apparent murder-suicide. Mrs. Ward was found bludgeoned, stabbed and suffocated, similar to Mrs. Ainsworth, whereas Mr. Ward was found with a knife in his heart. In both cases, police found no evidence of violence in the couple's relationships and suggested the cases were moments of madness. However, a senior coroner's officer did not accept this official explanation and kept the case files in a special interest folder. Many years later, Stephanie Davis, the current senior coroner's office for Cheshire, reviewed the original files and used modern crime science. The officer discovered 2 more nearby cases, plus 1 in Cumbria. All 3 cases fit the pattern of violence seen in the Cheshire murder-suicides, and the officer thinks there are enough similarities to link them to the same serial killer. Davis also enlisted the help of Steve Chancellor, one of America's top cold case police forensic investigators, who also suggested that both of the 1990s cases were likely double murders. He claimed vital evidence had been missed by the Cheshire officers at the scene, and he agreed with Miss Davis that the same offender was involved in both cases was a very real possibility. In her 2020 report, Davis has urged the National Crime Agency and Interpol to urgently review cases across Britain to see if there are any more similar cases. She is concerned that there is an outstanding offender who could still be offending and who needs to be brought to justice, and there is a real possibility that there is a serial killer at large in the UK. So that's 5 serial killers who have never been caught. A big thank you to the Patreons who selected the topic for this video. We hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.